So we got pharmakon, we got goetia, we've got this epaoide
Yeah,
complex.
yeah. Well, let's fast forward to the big one, which is
Okay.
magic itself.
Right. All right. Yeah.
So the
You
words
mentioned this word hadn't been invented.
hadn't been
Homer.
invented
Yeah.
yet in the early Greek period. It's just not there in Homer, not there in the Old Testament either, by the way, because the Israelites. I mean, nobody had invented it yet. So it's this everything we talked about as far as Homer goes for the Old Testament as well, where we can say, is this magic? Is the Witch of Endor magic or religion? Right? It doesn't tell us because they don't have these words yet. It's more of a what do you think from a modern perspective. But anyways, so the word magic comes from a very specific place and time in history, and that is the 5th century BC in Greece. So Greece was a very precarious place to be in the 5th century BC. It wasn't united politically at all. They were fighting, the cities were fighting amongst themselves. And then the Persian Empire rolls up. And the Persian Empire is probably the biggest empire that the world had ever seen at that point. It stretches from what's now Turkey to Egypt to Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, India. I mean, that whole area, it was giant, huge, powerful, rich, wealthy empire. And like most empires in world history, they're constantly looking to expand. So they set their sights on Greece, and there's also a personal reason they set their sights on Greece, but that's another story. So they invade Greece, and if you've seen the movie 300, you know that's a dramatization of it, but that's the general.
That movie
plot.
taught me they also had goat-headed people in their empire.
Yeah,
right?
of course. They were such a big empire, and to be fair, the Greeks might have thought that, right?
It's possible.
The Greeks probably thought they had a lot of crazy people in there.
among the barbaroi. Yeah.
Exactly. So maybe that was from a Greek point of view that movie was made. But yeah, so the invasion doesn't work. But then the Persians and the Greeks are still living next to each other, and you get this same situation we were talking about a while ago, where the Greeks look at the Persians and they're afraid of them because they keep getting invaded by these people, and they're worried they're going to invade again. But they have a respect for their knowledge. I mean, the Persians control two of the world's oldest cultures, Egypt and Mesopotamia. So the Persians have access to these incredible libraries and great antiquity of knowledge and documents at this point. 500 BC, we're talking 2,500 years of text, which is incredible. So the Greeks are like, wow, those Persians know a lot. And they know a lot of stuff. We don't know how it works, but we respect it to a certain extent. But we also think they're weird. Right. Just like, again, most cultures have always thought when you look at somebody else, you think they're weird because they're not you, and you don't understand them, and so you just kind of go off of stereotypes. So in Persian religion, which was Zoroastrianism, they had a priesthood, just like most religions do. So nothing weird there, and their priests were called Magoosh. In the Old Persian, which was their native language in Persia. And that Magoosh comes from an Indo-European root that just means power. We get our word might. It's might. Yeah, exactly. May and might both come from this. So again, it's not a magical term for the Persians. It literally just means the powerful people. The priests are the powerful people. So that makes sense, right? And the Greek historian Herodotus tells us some about what a Magoosh would be expected to do, and it's nothing that unusual for a priest. They're involved in funeral rituals, they perform sacrifices, they perform libations, you know, they look for omens, all the kind of normal ways you might try to connect with the gods back then, right? But the Greeks hear about these people, Magoosh, and by the way, the Latinized plural is magi, so you may know them better as that from the New Testament and the Christmas story. So the Greeks hear about these Magoosh priests, and they're like, oh, they're so weird, but they are powerful, and we respect them. And so what they do during this sort of fraught cultural moment in the 5th century BC, where Greece and Persia are kind of staring at each other from across the Aegean Sea, with some grudging respect, toward each other, the Greeks just borrow this word, and they coin a term magike, which is where we get magic from, of course. And for them, magike is anything that has to do with dealing with the gods, but it's a little off. It's a little weird. It's what they do. It's not what we do. Okay. And so this is really the birth of magic. It soon comes to be an insult, just like many terms for some other ethnicity or group, unfortunately, throughout history. It's what they do, they're weird, so we're going to use it as an insult, right? So even pretty early on, after it gets borrowed, it gets thrown around by writers like Sophocles, where Oedipus calls Tiresias a magos. And he doesn't mean he's a Persian priest. He means
Right.
he's a weirdo and he's a loser. He might be powerful, but we shouldn't trust him.
You know, that's actually very similar to something we see in Norse literature too, where terms for wizard, witch, or you know, translators try to make it like sound extra bad, but it's often just like a normal word for magic user, and it's because, you know, these are people outside the norms of society.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we've got it. So early on, what's interesting here is we've got this native tradition in Greece, for example, where we have kind of a sense of, all right, you know, practical things that might help somebody, pharmacon, right? Healing, especially, it sounds like, maybe connections with the dead. But then we have this outer idea that's other, that's more explicitly different from the homegrown traditions that are maybe more healing and maybe oracularly focused, right? Is that about right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in say 400 BC, what would you expect a Greek speaker who thinks he is doing magike?
Yeah.
What might he do under the heading of magike?
Yeah. Well, so it's hard to get into the head of a Greek speaker who thinks they're doing magike because it's such a loaded term. Yeah. So I'm not sure whether any one speaker is like, I'm doing magike, it's super countercultural. I'm sure there were people who were doing that. But it's easier to answer that question from a modern perspective and think about what we would call magike or magic in the ancient Greek world at that time period. Because the people who thought they were doing magike were probably on the margins of society and not writing us any texts. And we hear about them from Plato, where Plato, you know, talks about these different people, like the Agurtes, who is a character whom we translate beggar priest, which is not a great translation, but we don't have anything better. And a beggar priest, according to Plato, who didn't like them, a beggar priest would go door to door. That's the beggar part, and he would say, "I have a special connection with some particular god. I will pray to them for whatever you want. Just give me $20." And they would make a living this way.
This reminds me of something in India. It wakes a sunk chord in the mind somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the word. It's not the Brahmins, but there's a different word.
It does sound familiar.
Yeah, I'm trying to, like I said, a sunk chord in the mind somewhere.
Yeah.
Huh. So is that coming from some kind of Persian tradition?
I don't think the Agurtes is, and in fact, I think that's homegrown Greek. Plato just doesn't approve of them because Plato's Plato. He wants to design a very idealistic society, and for him, these people are not part of it. Religion for him should be totally controlled by the state. Power needs to be all in the state, not just physical power, but ideological power.
He's the original California.
Right. He's very much, the state needs to be controlling everything because he believes in the power of the state, at least his state. I don't think he believes in the power of all states. So he thinks if you can design the right state and give it all the power, society will be awesome. That's what Plato thinks.
So many people throughout history have believed that, and it seems to have new appeal to every generation.
It's really come back into vogue in the past 150 years.
Yeah.
And people don't realize how old that idea is.
No. So, all right. So we've got maybe these agurtes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. What is that from, that word?
I don't know. It's a weird looking word in Greek. And I've never looked it up. I've just thought to myself that word looks weird.
Okay.
There's nothing that is obvious that it might be connected to.
Yeah,
but I'm sure there's theories. I just haven't looked at them.
I can't. Nothing comes to mind.
There's a verb agero, which means to gather. So there could be some weird connection to the gatherers, but I don't know what that would be.
Okay. So there's them perhaps doing something a little bit like magic, although it sounds very much like religion.
It right? does, because they don't have this divide like we do.
Right, so this line is very perforated.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah, and it's more about our perspective than theirs, honestly.
Right. I've thought about that too in the Norse context, where, you know, I think just about anybody can do a limited kind of quote unquote magic. Right. So one thing that I see in the Norse world all the time, and tell me if this is familiar from the Greco-Roman or Old Testament world,
sure,
is words have power.
Absolutely.
If I sit here and I say, damn you, you may in fact be in danger of being lost to God.
Right.
Right? If I have some power over God somehow, which maybe I do as a priest or something, me saying damn you could actually harm you.
Oh yeah.
Without me necessarily being a magician, that's kind of a curse.
We all have power in some way in that sense,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it goes back to one of the 10 Commandments, which is don't take the Lord's name in vain.
Right, because the Lord's name is powerful.
It has power, right? And we might call that a magical thing today, but it's obviously religious because we're talking about God, right?
Right. And this reflects a very different relationship, I think, it's a treat, of humans to gods.
Right? They think of their relationships very differently than we do today.
Yeah, we have this notion okay, I say we. Of course, there's such a wide variety of ideas.
Modern Western culture, in general, as a stereotype. How about
conventional,
that?
20th century.
Right.
I'm not going to even say 21st century. 20th century. Western religion. I think. Where God is omnipotent.
Right.
God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, and He knows if you didn't mean to say "damn you" or if it was just a joke or something, so He's not going to do it.
But there's such a more transactional relationship.
Oh, very much so.
In the ancient world.
Yeah.
I've done a lot for this God. I've given him a lot of.
What has He done for me lately?
Yeah, I've given him a lot of fat steers.
Mm-hmm. And they say that all the time in the Iliad, right?
Yeah.
Achilles goes into his tent and prays to Zeus, and the first thing he says is, "Hey, bro, I've given you a lot. You owe me big time." Yeah. Which is not something anybody would say to God today in a pious fashion.
Zeus, bro, maniac.
Right.
But yeah, no, and is that magic in a sense? Because it's cause and effect.
Exactly. Right? So this is where we wrestle with the lines between religion and magic when we're trying to look at these ancient texts. Because one of the ways that people today will oftentimes try to delineate that divide between religion and magic is, are you just humbly asking God for something and then He deigns to give it to you? Right. Or do you know the right words to get something from Him? And if you know the right words that you can hit the God button and He gives you the blessing, that's magic. But if you're just asking, that's religion. But that doesn't really work for the ancient world because there isn't a lot of humble asking going on in the ancient world. Right. And when there is, it can be on both sides of that line. So there, another thing we'll talk about, I think, that your viewers might be interested in, is curse tablets after we're done with this little conversation. Curse tablets have a lot of humble asking going on of the gods, even though we would call that magic today. And then on the quote-unquote religion side, you get a lot of this transactional stuff that would put us off today from a religious standpoint.
Like, give us an example. A tablet with something like that.
Yeah, so these curse tablets, the reason we know about these curse tablets, and by the way, this is another modern term. They weren't called curse tablets back then. The Greeks called them kata desmoi, which is from two roots that mean to tie down or to bind or to control something, essentially. And so what they were is they started out as prayers to some particular god or deity, and they would be in competitive contexts where you were about to play in a sports game tomorrow, like a chariot race or something, or you were about to go to have a court case with somebody, or you're after the same girl as somebody else. And so these are contexts where you're competing and only one of you can win. And so you're worried, and you, of course, if you're smart at all, you would pray, right? You're going to try to pray to the gods because you need their help, and probably the other guy's praying too. So you better lawyer up if the lawyer is God in this case, right?
Actually, I hadn't thought about it, but that opens up a new way of thinking about it. You're almost getting a celestial advocate.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. And I mean, it's not a accident that one of the ancient words for the Holy Spirit in Christianity is parakletos, which means lawyer. It means advocate. That's how it gets translated. He's the heavenly lawyer.
There's a medieval text by that name. I'm trying to think of what it is.
Sometimes we call it the paraclete. We don't even translate it, the Holy Spirit, which sounds like parakeet. So I think it's a bird every time I hear it, but it's not. It's the Holy Spirit.
The Father, the Son,
and the parakeet. Exactly. Yeah.
That sounds like my version.
Right. There you go. So these curse tablets would be in these competitive contexts, and you would pray, and there would be usually a verbal element, just like with most ancient prayers. Again, if you don't believe your God knows everything, you got to get his attention or her attention.
Right.
So you need to say something out loud, and hopefully that prayer will fly to them wherever they are. But you want to make sure they get the message, and so as kind of a backup, you write it on what we would call a curse tablet, which in the Greco-Roman world is a lead tablet about this big. It's not very big. And you scratch the message, and it might be an abbreviated version of the prayer, like bind the tongue of whoever you're about to go to court with so they can't give their speech tomorrow, or it sounds terrible and the judge throws it out, something like that. And then you will. The reason we have so many of these curse tablets, which is great for us, is that you would bury them. A lot of times these would be prayers to some underworld god, or some god who has some connection with the underworld. So not necessarily Hades, but it could be Hermes because he goes back and forth, or someone like that. So you bury them. You're like sending them down into the earth to these gods.
And I'll note, the underworld is other.
Yeah.
Right? Just like beyond the Straits of Gibraltar is a place we don't usually go. Underground is a place we don't usually go.
Yes,
right.
exactly. And it's a little bit mysterious and shady, literally, and scary, right? So yeah, it's other. So you can see why this might be on the magic side of things, even if they didn't necessarily think of it that way, but they might have. So yeah, you bury these, and you would usually bury them in caves. But to loop back to something we talked about a while ago here, sometimes you bury them in graves. And this is where you start to get the dead playing a bigger role in ancient Greco-Roman magic, because they're constantly worried that their gods are not paying attention to them. They're not listening. And so you have to get their attention. One of the ways you get their attention is by giving them a lot of stuff. Right. But let's say you're too poor to do that, like most people. You can't sacrifice 100 oxen or something. Right. You got to get their attention another way. One way you can do this is bury your little curse tablet in the grave of somebody whom you think might be a messenger, serve as a messenger between you and the underworld, because they're already down there. Your dead relative or whoever this person is already down there, and they can be expected to look up at their grave every once in a while in longing, or and so they might see it if you deposit a curse tablet there, and then they'll go read the message and bring it back down to the underworld and say, hey Hades, my grandson wants you to do this. You think you might do it? And then one of these underworld gods will be more likely to know about it. So that seems to be what these curse tablets were meant for, kind of like a backup. You would be very specific on these curse tablets as to what you wanted done and who you wanted it done to, because you don't want the gods to make a mistake. Again, they're not omniscient, so if you just say curse John, even if the message gets down there, Hades might be like, I'm a busy guy, I got 2 minutes to do this, okay, John, he just picks a John, it's the wrong one, it doesn't help you, right? So you got to be specific. You say John, the son of, and interestingly, for a very male focused patriarchal culture, you put their mother's name and not their father's name, and this is probably because you don't want to get the parent wrong, and you're pretty sure who their mom is, but nobody's sure who anyone's father is.
Before
Ancestry.com, which has caused a lot of familial trouble in the past few decades, right?
And the past 20 days of my family.
Yeah, personal testimony. So I mean, the Romans had a phrase, pater semper incertens. The father is always uncertain. We don't know who he is, and we'll never know. So you use the mother's name because if you use the wrong father's name, you think John is the son of Bob, but really he's the son of Steve, but nobody knows it. And the gods know it though, because they were watching the whole thing, of course. So they curse some other John who's the son of Bob, and that doesn't get your message across, right?
Man, that's interesting, because it's an insurance policy, man. Yeah. I don't want him to get the wrong John. Yeah. Because I don't care about John, son of, Megara.
Yeah.
Talking about John, son of Septima.
Yeah.
Of course, it wouldn't probably be named John at the time, but yeah.
Yeah, that was a good Jewish name. So, I mean, hey, there are plenty of Jewish people on these tablets, so Jewish people participated in this too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So this really is not even, it's ecumenical.
Yes, it's not just one culture doing this. It really gets spread all over the Mediterranean. We found these curse tablets all the way from France to what we would today call the Middle East.
Bath, England, I think, is a place where a fair amount of these are,
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
And I don't think that's too different from the Norse world. I mean, you are writing it down because the spoken word has power. Yep. Like I said, damn you.
Yep.
But the written word has even more power because it lasts.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I wonder sometimes if the runic inscriptions that we find upside down, where the lettering actually faces the earth, is something similar to this. Because sometimes those are curses, right?
Do you think it might be a message to the underworld powers because it's facing? I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
I want you to note that this is the curse. There's one that's, somebody watching this from home is going to pause this and say exactly which rune it is. And I'm out here in Uncompahgre National Forest with, no way to look this up. But there's one that says something like, may the stone not be cut and may the sun never shine upon the one who disturbs this.
Mhm.
But I believe that one is found facing down at the earth. So
Interesting.
who's being asked to ensure
Yeah.
this, right? Perhaps some
Yeah.
chthonic figure,
Uh-huh.
right? Not
Yeah.
necessarily hell, but it
It's
could
a
be
little
some intercessionary.
dark. Some god that's a little dark.
Yeah, or some intercessionary figure like a powerful dead
Yep.
relative, maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Who may have the ear of a god somewhere, depending on where the dead are.
Sure.
I keep trying to navigate to get out of the sun here. Good times, and I do hope that all of you will check out Dr. Luke Gordon's channel, Word Safari. And I don't think this is the last time you're going to see Luke on this channel either.
I hope not. There's a lot of fun stuff to talk about.
A lot of crossover.
We found
both
13
channels.
years worth of material so far, so I'm sure we can keep it going.
Yeah, we're gonna. I think probably a few more collabs, something like
I think
that.
so.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, we can do, because we're getting together. It seems like every few months, maybe.
Yeah.
So we can do a few more collabs and kind of mix things between the channels and have some fun with it.
Yeah.
All right. Patreon, thank you very much for all of your support over the years. And
Thank you for making Jackson famous and giving him a living doing this, because this is great.
I hope you're spelling
Famous.
famous in font size 7.
It's Comic Sans, but
but making a living is a huge deal.
Yeah.
So thank you, and well, for now, from beautiful Western Colorado, in the middle of glorious golden autumn day, we're wishing you all the best.